Zero Trust World. Yeah, we're still here, and it's another sunny day in Orlando for all of you suckers still stuck in the Arctic tundra at my house. Thanks, honey, but you and the cats enjoy that sub-zero weather and 6 feet of snow. But
Yeah, we're doing fine now.
yeah, it's kind of nice here. I'm Doug White, and joining me today is Collin Ellis, who's a solutions engineer manager at ThreatLocker. So is another one, a live interview right here on the floor. Hi, Collin. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
I know you guys are busy and running around, and it's your event, so you're ultimately responsible for everything.
Right.
And that always makes a challenge. I've done a few of those, and it was kind of insane. But so you had said that you wanted to talk a little bit about the dark web.
Right.
And the dark web, I think the first time I ever heard about it was regarding Silk Road.
Right.
Long ago, and a friend of mine said, I heard you could buy drugs on the internet. And I was like, no.
Wait,
I was
right.
like, what kind of drugs? And he was like, like heroin. And I was like, no. And he was like, no, I'm serious. I read about it. He's like, you should figure it out. I was like, why? Are you wanting to buy heroin? And he was like, well, no, but it's just kind of a curiosity. And I went and started looking at it. And he was afraid to do it because, obviously that's pretty sketchy. And it's kind of like
some implications there, potentially.
Well, I mean, just the idea that you're doing, I mean, especially back then when it was rather unknown and going on a site like Silk Road, a lot of people were like, it's being monitored, who's watching. And he was like, you can probably do this in a safe way. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, yeah. And, and I built out a VM and I used this sandbox VM to go to this thing and install Tor and all this kind of stuff to get to it. And I understood a lot of that because I was around the internet since it started, and I'm old, and I knew about things like, I remember there was a thing called Mixmaster way back when, which was an email system that bounced your email off all these different addresses, so you could send, I guess, threatening emails to people, or I don't know what people were using this for, but I probably spam and phishing, early phishing stuff.
Yeah, in the early stages.
So let me just start by asking you, what is the current state of the dark web?
Yeah, and it's such a good thing to start defining because there's this perception that it's solely bad. And like anything else in the world, you have both sides of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, if you're looking to be anonymous, not for nefarious reasons, but if you're cognizant of trackers when you're searching on the general internet, your cookies and how those follow you and go site to site, if you don't want that type of tracking, a site like Facebook, Instagram, they have onion links to their platforms as well, so you can still connect in without the usual tracking. Now, because of the nature of the dark web, even in the title of it seems fishy still, rightfully so, because it is. And where the double-edged sword comes from in this, in being anonymous, it opens the door for everyone, no matter their moral compass, to make use of it. So there's this breakdown that we really need to have, in that it's still rather good. It still allows people to whistleblow, especially in regions where they can't really have that freedom. So again, it's good and bad, like most things in the world, but it has this light being shown on it that is purely negative, which justified, but it's more than that at the same time.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember the first times I was using Tor, was an extension of the first times I was using things way back when we were connecting to bulletin boards. Mm-hmm. Like I was connected to a bulletin board, I don't know, 80s maybe, that was called Well of Chaos or something like that. And, it had nefarious elements to it. There were definitely people that are talking about, here's a way to break into this bank and things like that. But it was very interesting to me because I wasn't trying to break into banks. I was very interested in these hacking concepts and all this. Right. And the internet didn't exist, and I couldn't, go search the web for, interesting little exploits. But here's people talking about them in the open.
Right.
And a lot of those people were these kind of libertarian, freedom and, I don't want to be tracked and all this kind of stuff. I mean, but there was a lot of nefarious stuff too. And then I started using Tor because of this tracking stuff. And I was like, especially for what I was doing, which was not nefarious at all. Mm-hmm. But I was helping police look for child abuse.
Understood.
And I did not want to be doing that from my house. And I mean, even though the police knew I was doing it and it was totally authorized and it was all above boards for us, I just didn't like the idea.
Right. There's so much room for error there, communication from
Absolutely.
the departments, and then now you're a suspect unnecessarily.
Yeah, right. You weren't doing this for bad things, right? No
Mm-hmm.
way. And so using something like Tor was a way to anonymize yourself, at least to some degree. I mean, I never trusted it fully.
Yeah.
I was
'Cause
like, don't
nothing's
ever trust
foolproof,
anything
right?
fully. But I wasn't doing anything I really felt was wrong, in any way. And I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't like the idea of being tracked. And today, I feel like that's still the case. I don't like the idea that I get sent to a website to order dinner. And that immediately starts tracking my phone and where I went next, and click here, and
And
oh,
then
you want
the
to put your
ads
order in?
follow
Click here to
through.
agree to our terms, and you're like, okay, wait, your terms are 800 pages long, and I need 3 attorneys in 6 weeks before I can decide to
Where
order
you
some
can say yes
tacos.
or no. Yeah.
What are some uses of the dark web that you see as, like, say, threat intel? I mean, is that a space where you like to look?
Yeah, it's a lot of times the starting point. And from an intel perspective, there's two schools of thought that I have. And if we are supposed to solve our security issues at all, as a nation, as an organization, as a culture, it becomes really important that the masses, the general individual out there, the most non-technical person really understands the weight the dark web carries when it comes to their data and the organizations they do business with, the subscriptions they have. Because even in my presentation earlier this week, I think one of the things that I'll live and die by is the fact that my personal security posture is really strong. But the weakest links to that are the people closest to me they don't have to be at the exact same level as I am, but carrying the same weight of how important is my day-to-day when it comes to, again, me doing something as simple as reusing a password, how much weight that actually carries for them, and how it affects me as well, directly.
I agree with that. I mean, and there's a lot of threat from that kind of thing. I was kind of laughing because I was thinking about relatives and stuff who are, either sending you malware by accident,
Right.
or you email them, happy holidays, and they forward that to 9,000
Some
bot
people.
sites, and and all of a
Exactly.
sudden you're getting beset upon by something crazy. I'm like, how did they get my information? And so being able to do that somewhat anonymously was an argument in the case of Tor. And I did want to ask you, just for the sake of the audience, the dark web is not separate from the internet.
Not at all.
Yeah. I mean, just for everybody's sake, because it's just IP addresses.
That's it.
And so these are IP addresses that refuse contact outside of the Tor network.
Exactly.
But they're attached. It's not like some special place you go. Silk Road was, that was my first thought when I heard about it. I was like, oh, it's like some BBS server, and you dial up with a, 1200 baud modem, and
And you
no,
connect
it was
to-
like, this is just on the net. This is on the internet.
Internet.
It's an IP address. I mean, you couldn't get to it without Tor.
Without Tor. And I am the first person to embrace technology and all the risks that comes with that. And the fact that we are all so connected makes it so easy for us to go in, live our day-to-day lives. But the next bit here is the security ramifications. So to your point, the dark web is not this difficult place to get to, and it's even easier now because most of it is prepackaged. You can download Tor, run it right on your computer.
Right.
Not the safest way to go about it by any means, but it's very simple. And to go back to your previous question, when it comes to intel, now we look at every bad actor out there, the individual ones, the more coordinated ransomware groups. I pick on Clop ransomware quite often because they're very structured. But the one thing about them as a ransomware group is that they do flaunt their work.
They do.
So getting a better understanding of how they operate, it's actually easier now than it ever has been before, especially with the companies they target. They have this mantra of, if I'm better than you technically, I'll let the entire world know. And they break down exactly how the attacks transpired as well.
I mean, I think that was always sort of a hacker ideology of this sort of counting coup kind of thing, because long ago, people would have like sort of hidden sites,
Right.
Maybe running on an alternate port, even wasn't even very hidden at all. That, they've got a list of people they've compromised going, yeah, this is all the people I did, and here's the screenshots of me,
Okay.
in those networks. And yeah, that's pretty good threat intel, because when I was working with some threat intel companies, they were telling me, we have, and these were like former like spies
Right.
who were basically using the same fieldwork skills they had as spies to gather information for your company. And they were going out there and they were doing the equivalent of undercover police sitting in a bar. There's undercover police sitting in bars listening for somebody saying, you want to buy some cocaine?
Yep.
And then going, okay. And I know somebody who used to do that. And, they didn't even arrest the person. They just they videoed it, and then they went back to the video, that guy right there, and they would put them on the list. And then, they didn't want to be identified or anything, and they could just go sit in the bar and listen. And I mean, that's sort of the starting point of threat intel.
That's it.
Now, there's two questions that come right from that for me.
Okay.
One, how dangerous is it for an individual to go on the dark web? And I don't even mean to buy drugs, but I mean to collect their own threat intel.
It is very dangerous, and that's why even in the guides that we would propose, if you're doing research, I would rather you adopt a methodology of using a platform like Tails. Give yourself an extra layer of separation where if you are being targeted, you get a little bit more convenience of plugging a drive out and disconnecting immediately, right? Again, it's not the safest or the most secure way to navigate itself,
right.
But for the technical know-how, going back to what we discussed, it was very difficult at one point to maybe get started. Mm-hmm. It's too easy, in my opinion, to have Tor just run.
Very easy.
So the threat that really exists there is apparent, because a lot of people think because the Tor circuit is anonymizing you, it's impossible to backtrace that, and it's not. You just need time and the resources to get it done.
Yeah, because I remember early days, again, there were these bulletin boards, and you would see these people log in and post, I want to hack, will you teach me? And people like, here, download this file, it's got everything you need, and it wipes your hard drive, or attacks the FBI from your IP address, and and it's like, now what you need to learn, which is don't trust anybody.
Trust anything over there.
I mean, so I think thing one would be, if you do plan to do this kind of threat intel yourself, is going to be to do some pretty serious research and build a scoping policy and an approach policy well in front of even trying to do anything like this. What about individuals that just want to go check it out? How dangerous is that?
I think there's risk associated with everything, even just activating Tor.
Yeah, going to Facebook.
And going to Facebook. Again, very risky in that respect. So you can't deny that ever. And if, just as a general person, I download Tor on my Mac or my Windows computer, I'm not taking the extra mechanisms, that doesn't immediately put you at risk if you're using it in the same scope of your daily browsing, right? The risk is generally about the same, but you're tracked less immediately, right? It becomes a bit more difficult to identify you and exactly where you're coming from, ever so slightly though. But to go a little bit further, to go through the wikis, to go through the dark web marketplaces, to go through, you're exposing yourself as well. And in my presentations, when I prepare, just a personal note from me, I don't prepare for these assignments at home. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Not unless your home has an awful lot of encapsulated, compartmentalized workplaces that are detached from
that directly.
Oh, the analogy I used to use, I was talking about this to some clients who were asking these kind of questions, and I was, I am with you. It's not inherently 100% dangerous. And the analogy I was using, I used to have a hobby of watching pickpockets. It's real world, and I love to do this. I mean, I know it sounds kind of awful because you're watching people get robbed, but I mean, I remember, and I remember thinking there's stages of this. I'm just sitting over here on a wall by the Colosseum in Rome where the subway train comes out, and watching the pickpockets that are all loitering around there, and there was very little danger for me there. I mean, maybe a little bit, because if they notice me, they're going to come stomp me or something. But then if I extended that a little more, and I said, I'm going to see if I can get them to follow me, and and if I can shut them down, or I'm going to go stop them. I mean, you can kind of continue this into a riskier and riskier behaviors.
As you get through.
Also, same thing watching drug dealers or stuff like that. I mean, it's just watching some drug dealers outside the Port Authority is not that risky, but they see you watching them, you may start to veer off into some danger territory,
right.
and now you go over and start messing with them, and the next thing you know, you're getting stomped in an alley somewhere because they don't appreciate this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So, is there any one big tip you would have for companies and enterprise about the dark web?
It's going to be, a lot of times these conversations with these organizations have been very superficial. You scan the dark web and you get your readings back, any of my employees, my company domain, anything related to it. And it needs to go a little bit deeper, right? And it's going to go back to this idea of your personal security posture and what that actually looks like. Okay. So in my perspective, if you think about your internal staff right now, you do a scan and there's nothing coming back from your domain, it's a interesting bridge to try and cross. But are you going to look at one of your employees and say, can we scan your personal email to see if it's there? No. But we should be able to empower them to get that done on their own. The awareness that they have of whether or not they've actually been breached, it's nowhere near where it needs to be. And this could be something as simple as, again, every other subscription they've ever had, their data being out there in some way, shape, or form. Most people are clueless about that, and they have no idea that their favorite passwords are known by everyone.
Or right at the top of the RockU list.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I actually showed my RockU list to somebody once, and they were like, that's our password right there, number 4. I was like, he was like, how did you get that? And I was like, dude, like, I didn't get it. It's been here all along. I said, I got added some, but because we used to always add, stuff we found. If we cracked a password or we found a password in a pen test, we added it to the top of the RockU list because it's like, oh, there's some more, and the bigger the list, the better. That is really cool. Well, Collin, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about the dark web. Collin is a solutions engineer at ThreatLocker, which is fun, a manager even. You're the solutions engineer manager at ThreatLocker. For all of our Zero Trust World 2026 coverage from Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/Z Tango Whiskey, or Jeff says Zulu Tango Whiskey.
I like
Sorry,
that.
Jeff. But stick around, and we'll be right back with more interviews after a quick break.